Very warm greetings everyone. Now this is the lecture on Introduction to Environmental Economics. This is the series which has been going on. In the earlier lectures we had already covered use and non-use value as well as the valuation method in environmental economics. Today's lecture we will be focusing on the basic elementary aspect of environmental economics to acquaint you what exactly the stream of economics, which is environmental economics, it means to the society and the world. There are certain learning objectives of this particular lecture to understand the linkages between economics and environment, to explore the environmental related problems in developing countries, factors responsible for environmental challenges, and to understand the difference between the positive and normative approach or perspective. This is elementary building block of environmental economics. Environmental economics is concerned with the impact of economy on environment as well as the significance of environment to the economy. It's both the ways. Environmental economics deals with the appropriate way of regulating the economic activity so that the balance is achieved between environmental economics and social goods. The field of economics, environmental economics, it dates back very late to 1950s and early 1960s. This field really took off in 1970s and it has been booming ever since. The essence of environmental problems in the economy is the economy itself. The whole angle, the entire environmental challenge or the problem arises from the existence of economy itself. The economy needs to deal with the producer's behavior and consumers' desire to attain the equilibrium outcome. As you all know, it is in the modern economy, we always rely on markets to match producers' cost with the consumer's demand to yield the right amount of production and consumption, that is optimal or Pareto. However, in the case of pollution, the markets fail to yield the socially desirable amount of pollution. Marketable permits, we have been talking about them for pollution control, are now widely embraced, as well as the valuation method and techniques are integral part of environmental prevention. Problems, challenge, environmental valuation is being used to make decisions concerning the major public projects related to environment, and environmental impact assessment has been done by public policies in order to see how environmental economics plays a major role in current climate change debate. We have been talking about since last lectures related to environmental problems, pollution, climate change, etc. So environment becomes a deep-seated concern which brought about by the coincidence of high income and high population density. The entire challenge is originated from the fact of economics as well as there are certain factors which are leading to environmental problem. The Earth's environment, if you take it, Earth's environment in its own self, it is very forgiving and capable of absorbing most of the human throw. Human throw is what we consume and produce. There is a wastage generated. It usually cleanses itself automatically. So by nature, environment has a self-cleansing mechanism. It is this self-cleansing mechanism that gets disrupted because of certain reasons. Certain factors that are responsible for the elementary problem of environment. First is the increase in the total number of population, people. Now when we talk about total number of population, we are basically talking about the density of population. The density of population exemplifies the environmental concerns overloading the capacity of earth for self-cleansing. Basically, it tells you that the self-cleansing mechanism, natural mechanism of environment gets disrupted because of increase in density of population. And there are many other reasons for density of population increase, rise, migration, urbanization. There are many other socio-economic factors. The other prominent factor that is giving rise to environmental problem are the income, rise in income. Rich and developing countries, they tend to consume more and more, but also generate more pollution at the same time. The environment is considered as a luxury good for them. For poor countries and people who are underdeveloped, the environmental issues often take a backseat to other needs related to the survival. So it's the day-to-day life survival that matters more to them as compared to the quality of environment or the living conditions they are in. As people become richer and richer, wealthier, they turn their attention increasingly to the quality of their living. Environment matters to them, which is the planet where they live in, the surroundings where they live in, that matters to them more and more. So the concentration of richer and wealthier people is more on the quality of environment rather than the day-to-day struggle and everyday challenges. Now, as the trend towards increasing wealth continues, we expect concern for the environment to rise over time. As we know that in the developed countries, pollution and the preservation of natural environment such as wilderness areas are the issue of major concern. Now, there are two basic issues related to pollution. When we look at pollution as an environmental challenge, we need to figure out what is the right amount of pollution we are looking for. And then how can we get that polluters to control their emissions? These are the two main issues. The right amount of pollution, what is that? Pollution, which is generated as a byproduct of our production processes. To determine the cost of the pollution control, it is necessary to understand the structure of goods of production, the various processes involved in the production line, and how the costs are differing at every stages of production and how they are associated with the levels of pollution. The firms face several options for reducing the pollution levels. Now, there's various ways in firms can apply reduction in pollution. Some of them are listed here: end of pipe treatment, modifying the production process, modifying the characteristic of the product which you're making, then relocating the productive activity to reduce damage. Relocating is like going to the suburbs and cities which is away from the civilization to the areas where lesser people live, so that impact of productive activity is felt in a lesser way to people. Investing in research and development to find out ways for controlling pollution. So there are these ways in which a firm can actually take an initiative to reduce the amount of pollution. The right amount of pollution is a big challenge. It is the pollution permit sometimes that works, and we have talked about in the earlier lectures about the permit markets. So environmental, under the headings in the lecture series of environmental markets, we have talked in detail, in depth about the pollution permit markets. They exist that the firm has an additional choice of buying permits to emit, and rather than reducing emissions. So alternatives available to the producing agencies or the firm is either to reduce emissions by the listed activities we just now discussed, or they can just buy permit to pollute. The easiest option is use the permit market to pollute or emit. Now, there are certain costs and benefits involved in reducing pollution. There exists costs of reducing pollution. Consumers can reduce consumption of polluting goods from the consumer's point of view. And that is difficult to foresee because consumers, they need to satisfy their desires and producers need to provide them those commodities. So the inherent awakening of the consumers to reduce consumption of those polluting goods is something to be expected not so easily. Therefore, characterizing the cost of conceptual level as well as measuring these costs empirically, it becomes a very complex question. Determining the right amount of pollution also involves determining the damages from the pollution. So, the word damage from the pollution is again a very critical aspect of cost and benefit analysis. We have been discussing about cost benefit analysis in the earlier lectures. To give a little depth to it and more explanation to it, the word damage from the pollution needs to be interpreted in a better way. They may refer to water pollution leading to people suffering from sickness, air pollution leading to physical irritation and lot of health diseases, reduced visibility and decreased lung capacity, etc. are all associated with the health impact or health damage related to pollution. Now, to see about this particular damage, one needs to monetize this damage in terms of money value. And another way of tackling and measuring the damage is the willingness to pay. Again, it's an abstract method, but economists have again and again attempted this method of measuring the damage. In economics, the severity or the urgency of the damage or impact of pollution is measured by the magnitude of willingness to pay to reduce pollution. It is difficult to measure willingness to pay. One way is by measuring the overall magnitude or importance of pollution reduction to a person. So, willingness to pay is basically to what extent a person is valuing environment. To get that quality of environment, how much valuable or what value a person is ready to sacrifice. That gives you the willingness to pay. It is measured by the amount the person is willing to give up something very valuable in exchange for improved quality of environment he is looking for. Measuring willingness to pay is not so easy and it is subject to lot of research and environment in case of environmental economics. Having characterized the importance of pollution reduction to an individual, how it matters to an individual, using the willingness to pay, it is possible. And if it is possible to individuals living in the society, then it is the sum of individual preferences to obtain a societal willingness to pay altogether to reduce pollution. So, all the members living in an area or a society, if you sum up the willingness to pay of all the members in that society to reduce pollution, that gives you the societal willingness to pay. The optimal amount of pollution reduction is the society's willingness to pay and the cost of pollution control. So, now this has to be done since it's a pollution is a social bad and it is the government who is responsible. Generally, it is the central planning and optimal pollution control becomes a challenge for the central planners. In central planning system, the government could easily tell each polluter how much to emit, like a top-down approach, but it works only up to a point and has severe problems in the case of many firms and many polluters. So it becomes difficult when you have large market. large number of firms and large polluters, it becomes difficult to instruct on the part of centralized government to take care of each levels of pollution emitted by each individual firm. It is difficult to determine the best way by the government to intervene in the economy to yield the right kind of pollution or to design a right kind of pollution control method without excessive administrative cost involved of monitoring, you taking empirical monitoring system and administrative cost of checking and reviewing the processes of production and control costs. So providing the right incentive to undertake research to reduce cost for the future is one of the challenge that a centralized form of government faces. This involves preserving wild and scenic areas. Now, the developed countries, on one side, they have the challenge of maintaining the quality of environment that accounts to reducing pollution or reducing emissions. On the other hand, preservation of natural environment is another aspect of maintaining the quality of environment. That involves preserving the wild and scenic areas from the development and protecting the animals and the plant species from extinction. The primary issue with this aspect of ecological challenge is providing the balance between forces of development and the threat it gives to the environmental resources and the society value of preservation. So, the process of development is harmful for the natural environment, and one needs to put it involves or it incurs cost of preservation. So, cost of preservation of the natural resources is something that developed countries need to deal with to have the quality of environment apart from reduction of pollution or emissions. How do you preserve natural environment? Environmental protection usually involves intervention of government in an economy, and it is often difficult to decide on the proper extent and the level to which that intervention is required by government. Now, the ethical judgment of to what extent the government should intervene and the whole idea of value it should give to environment is something that gives a question or gives rise to a question or concept of positive and normative perspective of economics. What do you mean by positive economics? Positive economics is value-free approach, aiming to explain the economic behavior of markets and the institutions. For example, why the prices of gasoline increase when OPEC meets to restrict the output. So, empirically, if you observe, there is some relationship between two economic variables or components. That observation gives you only a positive side of economics, while the normative economics attempts to use economic tools to design government policies to intervene in the marketplace. What is the best way of intervening in the market? That becomes an ethical issue for the government. The fundamental to environmental economics is the notion of market failure. Repairing the market failure typically requires government intervention. The kind of government intervention needed and the extent of government intervention required is a question that pertains to normative economics. So, this basically leads to two ways of approaching a research question in economics. One side, it is a positive economics, the other side is the normative approach. Positive approach is simply what it is. what is the relationship between various economic variables, maybe environment and economic activity, but what should be the action or stand or intervention by the government to correct a situation. It pertains to the normative questions of economics. So, this is to understand the environmental economics, and there are certain various branches of economics that it gives rise to: environmental economics, ecological economics, and another is the resource economics. Now, we would like to question or comprehend the linkages between the resource economics and ecology, to comprehend the similarities between the ecological economics and environmental economics, and to understand the difference between the resource economics and environmental economics. Now, we will try to investigate all the various branches and the interlinkages between these branches after a short break. Thank you so much.